Live.
One sec, hold on.
Get your best pose on.
And clicking OK. It was just taking a second for the buttons to pop up.
Come on, we're practicing our poses.
Your event is starting.
The event is starting.
You're live.
We're live. Hey,
Hi.
we're live.
How's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. Sorry, 15 minutes late. Eric. Anyway, so Eric's sitting over there. Can you see him in the shot? We do have. We are using a little tiny webcam. The problem has been is that we didn't get to use our nice fancy HDMI cameras. So that was the technical issue of the day. So how the devil are you?
I'm really good.
We were just talking about NAMM, about how insane it was.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I spent X number of days there, and I only finally got to see guitars for literally the last 5 minutes, which is a real...
I didn't even go to that.
You didn't go to guitars.
I stayed in Pro Audio. It was hectic enough, but I mean, for those people who don't know about NAMM, it's 100,000 people walking around, some type of musician or music related people, and they're displaying everything from guitar picks to software. You know, so it's really insane.
Did you see anything there that was really exciting for you?
I saw some cool plugins.
Like what? What did you see?
Like UVI had some cool stuff. I've been, I mean, maybe I'm just new to it, but their plate plugin is really nice.
Who? Oh,
UVI.
oh, you know what? We did one thing with them about a year ago, and you're like the third person that's told me how good they are.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. But what the best thing about NAMM is just running into friends that you don't get to see until the next NAMM.
And the first thing I did, everybody, by the way, is apologize to Bob, because he came up and said hi when I was at the Audient booth and we were doing 55 things. And I was like, yeah, great to see you. Sorry, I'm really busy. And then I saw him this morning and I was like, I'm really sorry. You know,
it's good to be busy.
But that's the way it is, isn't it? It's just non-stop, wall-to-wall, person-person
It
stuff.
is, yeah. In fact, everyone gets what they call NAMthrax because you're just shaking everybody's hand.
Yep.
And germs and yeah, it's crazy.
For us, I think we did, I don't know, it was also some of the busiest time that we have in a year. It used to be for me, and this is a good business thing because we're going to talk a lot about the business stuff as well as looking at the music. And we're going to go over his last course and talk a little bit about that and talk about other courses. And obviously when we've got stuff up here, feel free. I'm looking at your chat. You can ask questions about, you know, the way he mixes, the way he does stuff. The reason why we wanted to do the first live webinar with you than over anybody else is because, frankly, you're like our #1 mentor. Everybody absolutely loves you.
And the blackmail.
And the blackmail, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. The waking up with the horse's head in the bottom of my bed and the blood all over it probably helped.
It's supposed to be a goat. We couldn't find one.
But anyway, I think that, or I believe really strongly that I've said this actually on and off over the last maybe 3 years or 4 years that we've known each other. I believe that you, when it comes to the high mids and the mid range and the high end, I think your mixes are the most detailed of anybody I know.
Oh wow!
And I must ask you, did you consciously get into that world knowing that we're all listening on this now?
I did later. I work so hard on the high mids specifically just because of paranoia. And when I moved to town, my second year, I joined a production team with a producer that liked to listen very, very loud. Right. So I tried to make my mixes hurt as least as possible so that I could stand the loudness even with earplugs. And we're talking like 130 dB, you know, like crazy loud. Just chest caving.
Is that hip hop or rock?
Yeah, R&B, hip hop.
Yeah.
And you know, those snares and those claps, they just at that level, they're just ripping your head off. And I like to listen loud anyway, so we're talking louder than I like to listen. So I would always work on those mids and just make sure they were as smooth as possible, so that when you did listen loud, it was enjoyable as much as possible. Yep. So that's where it started, and then maybe after 2010, I started paying attention to the iPhone and the laptop sound and how to make it sound better, you know, for those people.
Sure.
So now I got, I don't know if you guys know the Audrey IO plugin that streams to your has
No,
an
what's
app.
it called?
Audrey IO.
Audrey
like I said,
IO.
I might be saying it wrong, but it's an excellent plugin. See if I can find it here.
Eric's going to try and tape down this.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, so we have this.
Camera here.
Taping down the camera.
Taping down the camera.
So this company makes this $25 plugin that streams to your network. So you put the free app on your iPhone
It's
or
spelled
Android.
AUDRE.
Yeah, like and then IO.
IO. Oh, so like Audra IO.
Yeah,
So it's
something
AU.
like that.
I'm gonna write it in the chat. AUDRE IO.
But it's just a quick setup. You download the free app, and all of a sudden from your master bus, you're hearing your mix live, and you just set your phone down and start mixing, and you can I'll tailor DSs on vocals while I'm listening to the phone and hi hats and stuff.
That's genius.
Yeah, $25.
$25.
Everybody
Sold.
Yep.
I didn't know about that. That's great. Well, it's interesting because I've said this many times. I listen to some of the sort of, especially the sort of late 90s through early 2000s or mid 2000s, like rock mixes. Mm-hmm. None of them translate anymore.
Yeah.
Because what used to be really exciting about those mixes is that the mixers would push the overheads. They'd have that really obvious transient designer kick and snare. Remember the snares would go,
yeah. Of course. Yeah.
and it was like everybody was like, and I feel like this happens in music all the time. A new device comes out, and all we do is use it on every mix.
Right. Of course.
You know, it's almost like, you remember when Logic became popular, like massively about 10 years ago? Every pop song had the same template.
Yeah.
For about 6 months, you turn on the radio and you're like, oh, they opened pop template. Here's the same synth sound. You know,
Right.
Well, there was a sort of period with every snare was a transit designer snare, and just sounded like a ruler hitting a table, going pat pat pat. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that to get the excitement, they had this shimmer of overheads,
Hashy cymbals.
yeah, and it was exciting on a big system.
Yeah.
When you have tons of low mids and low end coming. Now, I'm not going to name the artist, but you can pretty much go put it on your cell phone or your laptop. Literally, all you hear is, and I've noticed that massively, and because some of these bands I enjoy, and now I go back and listen to that, but I could listen to your mixes, and they just translate better than anybody else's.
Oh, thank you.
I think you and I think Richard Furch is the same way. He's super detailed in his mids.
Yeah.
You know, but you guys were both doing it way before everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think everybody else was still stuck in a rut. You know, of thinking that was exciting.
Right.
But the first time I ever heard one of your mixes coming out of my laptop, I was like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. But it has to translate. Okay, so everybody hearing everything okay? Everybody says the audio is good. Eric put some foam under the cam. It shakes every time the console is thumped. Oh, okay. I thought that was on its own stand.
No, or
Right, no thumping the console.
all right.
Well, not too much anyway. Yeah, I think it is what it is. Unfortunately, get the artist name. Oh, I don't think I was talking about a specific artist there, Sisam. Okay, so let's go in and there's a couple of things I want to talk about.
Okay.
But first of all, you know what? I think one of the things Sam was suggesting to us was talking about growing your own studio business, which I think is really kind of cool, because I think you are an amazing example of that. Like, when did you arrive in Los Angeles?
2001, 9/11.
Really?
Yeah.
September 2001.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I didn't get into my own studio. I didn't even know I would ever have my own studio until, 2007 started thinking about it, but before 2007, it was all about, you'd get the phone call and it's like, okay, what studio do you prefer to work at? And I'd have a handful of studios at different budgets, and then I just show up there and have my gear carted over there. But then around 2007, the phone call started being, do you have your own room by any chance? Mm-hmm. And all the labels were trying to save money.
Sure.
So you know, I bought my first big Pro Tools rig that I owned myself, you know, and started, you know, thinking about the idea of actually having a room. So for 3 years, I leased a room. And then after that 3 years, Eric and I built the Echo Bar. But before then, when I first arrived at LA, I never thought about having my own studio business. It was just more about me getting on projects and working at, you know, the famous studios, you know.
I completely relate. It makes perfect sense to my career as well. Do you feel, I mean, it's basically necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
People are coming to you and saying, here's $1,000. And you're like, well, I can take the $1,000 and give half of it to this guy.
Yeah.
Or I can keep the whole thing if I have my own studio.
Exactly.
It's just as simple as economics. And I remember the same thing for me, I was working with Aaron Johnson, and we started getting projects to do together, and it was fantastic, and the budgets were good, and then the budget halved.
Oh, yeah.
Like absolutely just halved, and it
Yeah.
was like, well, don't you have your own studio? Was the response.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, just so people know, I think the clear point here is that we're talking labels as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We're not
Major
talking
labels,
the
for
necessity of an independent working with independent artists. We're talking about
Yeah.
labels. are
Major
expecting-
labels.
expecting to have your own studio.
You're expected now to have a place to get a mix done.
Yeah.
Whether it's at home in an apartment, or a hole in the wall you rent, or a fancy studio you build, like
Yeah.
whatever the level, you're expected that they can send you a song and you can turn back a mix. You know.
Sure.
So
I also think they probably got wise to a little scrupulousness, shall we say, where, you know, guys were like charging, you know, a day rate to be at a studio, but they were doing like 5 mixes.
Right.
You know? So I think the business can't stand that kind of excess anymore. I think now we're in a place now where, and I think in a good way, where we are accountable a lot more, and because we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
And I like that feeling, to be honest. I like the democratization of the music business.
democratization.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's good if you're talented, frankly.
Yeah.
You know, it's good. People come to you knowing they're going to get an amazing result. Okay, so as far as growing your own studio business, so you basically said you came out of it out of necessity. But do you find now that you have, because this is a pretty decent sized complex. I mean, you've got a massive live room. You've got another studio over there, which is Eric's, and your studio's here. You've got a huge kitchen area and hangout area. You've got a nice lounge. I mean, it's a proper facility. Are you finding that between, you know, mixing songs and stuff, you're looking to sustain it by bringing in other artists and other producers?
Well, yeah. So the vocal booth that would be for this control room, which I don't use because I mostly mix, I rent out to a producer friend of mine. So he's turned it into a little control room.
Great.
You know, and then
Is that David?
No, his name is Mansour.
Great.
Yeah, and then and so now we're collaborating on projects together, which is cool. And then Eric has modified his room into a 5-1 room, so he's now doing film and TV mixing as well as
Wonderful.
His other stuff. And we're even thinking about maybe even building another control room. So yeah, it's all about using the square footage and
Sure.
not letting it just sit there, you know.
Yes, last night I was talking to somebody who has a room over at Metropolis in London.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember when they said, like about 10 years ago, it was definitely not doing so well. Then they had a new owner came in and turned it into more of a multi-room facility. And I think that's the reality. It doesn't matter if you're in a major city or not. I think these multi-room facilities make a lot of sense, you know.
Yeah, so like my assistant CD, he does photography stuff. So if I'm working on an artist and she wants to do a photo shoot, I'll plug him and be like, hey, we have a green screen and, you know, like,
Great.
you know, we have all the lights that you need and like everything. And we do live videos, you know, acoustic guitar, you know, vocal in the live room, and they set it up and film it. And so anything we can do in this facility, just to have more streams of income, you know.
I think that's the secret. That's the bottom line here. Is like, if you know, in your local community, is like making yourself into, like, you know, being an entrepreneur, bringing in, because if you want people to discover you as a producer, engineer, mixer, you know, be available to fulfill all of those roles, but also support the artist in many, many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, half the time I'm working with artists and I'm teaching them how to do their own social media. You know, I have a lot of young artists, and they're like, oh, you know, I can't find time to do this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay, go to my Instagram, go to my Facebook, go to all that stuff. I'm like, today I mixed 3 songs, and I did this, this, and this, and I also did all of my own social media.
And replied to every comment.
Yeah, reply to every comment and do everything. And it's just like, but it's amazing. Everybody's always too busy and didn't have time. And I'm just like,
I mean, you can't. You
can't do everything.
That's part of the music business now. Being
exactly.
an artist, you can't be too busy for it. It's a necessity.
Yeah,
you have to do it.
So I think it's a good part of our job, and it will keep people coming back to you. It will keep artists coming back to you if you're there helping them in all ways, shapes, or form. You know?
I had a manager I was working with on another artist, and he asked me if one of his other artists could come rehearse in the live room for a show. I'm here mixing. That room's just sitting there.
Great.
You know, they offered $100. It's like, hey, that's $100 I didn't have before, and now I met her, and potentially we'll be mixing for her in the future. So,
somebody's saying that there's sync problems.
Let's see.
Other people aren't seeing sync problems, Philip. So it must be. I'm not sure why you've got sync problems there. It doesn't look like anybody else is. Mark says it's fine. Phil says it's fine. Tom says it's fine. Todd says it's fine. But if you feel like you want to post your dislike, says I'm going to post my dislike. All right. Lisa suggests you hit the refresh button. Okay. Yeah, nobody else is having. Cy Sound isn't. Martin isn't. Lisa isn't. Alex isn't. AJ isn't. So I would just, it just says, no, and nobody else is having sync problems. Not here, nobody's having sync problems. Okay, great. Yeah, just try refreshing. Thank you, everybody, saying everything's all good for them. D-stairs, no problems here, no problems here. Okay, great. So I'm glad that we're not having any problems there. Question is, the question is, what are your questions? Business-wise, fine in Germany. Glad to hear it. So, do you have any questions of Bob? Here we go. Sheila says, "How do you handle working with difficult artists or difficult labels?" Ooh.
Labels are just labels. I would never really describe them as difficult. What gets difficult is when you get 7 people you have to do mix notes with, and they don't agree.
Right.
You know, and then there's. Yeah, you just have to keep your temper in those situations, and maybe suggest that they get together and get their notes, you know, on par with each other before they come to you. But labels I don't really ever find them too hard to deal with. It's really independent artists, and the more inexperienced, the more difficult they can be, and the more obsessed they are with every little thing. So if the hi-hat is panned to 35 instead of 40, that's a big issue, you know.
Sure.
Where you work with Usher and he doesn't even come to the mix session, you know.
Right.
So it's that's. I had a difficult artist recently, and he wanted his song to sound exactly like this other famous rap song, and it just wasn't in his production for that to happen. Right. And he's not that artist. He doesn't have that voice. And not to say that his was worse. It's just different. And some people just focus on the wrong thing. And I think the hardest thing is when someone doesn't hire you for what you do. They hire you just because they need somebody, and that's always dangerous. Because he wanted the sound of one of his favorite records. He should have hired the people that made that record.
Sure.
If he was gonna, you know, have any sort of chance.
Probably also should have recorded it that way.
Probably, yeah. But it's you got to weigh. You got I don't know, like you have to weigh how you're gonna approach them. If depending on how important the gig is, if it's gonna lead to other gigs, if it's sometimes you have to play politics, be nice, get through the gig, because if you resist too much or you start fighting with people, then you might lose out on something much bigger. And other times you got to stand your ground. It's really a situation by situation.
Absolutely.
case by case situation. You know, it's you don't want to be taken advantage of, because once you do once, then they'll keep doing that. You know,
Right.
but at the same time, you know, you want to please the client so that they come back to you
Absolutely.
if they're a worthy client. You know,
Yep.
if they're not someone you enjoy working with, you just got to cut your losses and tell them, you know, this isn't for me. You know, let's part ways. You know.
Right. Absolutely. No, I agree with you entirely. It's always a balance, isn't it? It's like you. I think this came up in a masterclass that we were teaching this week. Exactly the same thing, and I said one of the ways I just deal with it is, it doesn't really help me to get massively angry or annoyed or anything with the client. I get through the gig, and then the next time they call me, I'm really, really busy. It's just as simple as that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's,
There's definitely engineers and producers out there that they just have their ways, and that's the ways. And
Sure.
if you don't like it, move on. And those guys end up losing a lot of gigs because musicians are flexible, moldable people. Their emotions, you know, vary.
Sure.
And if you're not like that, you don't fit with them, you don't vibe with them, then they're just going to move on. So I don't recommend being just a stone, you know, a my way or the highway type of person in this industry. It's you'll lose out on a lot of opportunities that way.
I know a mixer at the highest level that the way they mix is because they use. If I get too specific, everybody's going to know who I'm talking about. But anyway, they have a system that things end up coming in on multiple buses, should we just say? And the problem with that is if you want to like maybe bring things forward in a certain way and make them feel drier. I'm trying to be very vague, so it's not obvious what I'm talking about. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't, because you have to break their system down and come outside of it. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, is so they have very specifically have a sound. So it's kind of a twofold statement, because okay, that makes them inflexible.
Yeah.
And that's true. However, don't hire them if you don't want their sound.
Right.
So it's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. It's a little frustrating if maybe you've hired them and you're like, can I bring this vocal more forward here? And it's like, no, that's not going to happen because the way I bust these things together. Yeah. However, didn't you hire that person for their vocal sound? You know,
some people they just need a mixer because they don't have the skills, but they're so in tune with what they want. They don't want someone else's opinion. They just want it to be done, and that's definitely. I think the further a mixer gets in his career, he does that less and less. It's like I prefer people that have heard a record I've done and liked it. They like what I do in a general sense. And they just want to see what I'm going to do with their record. And then if there's something that they just can't stand, we'll tweak that.
Sure.
But, you know, like this last course I did for you, the Uku Saviste, I just mixed.
Pronounce that again?
Uku Saviste is his name. I hope I said that right.
I'm not going to try.
But, you know, I just mixed that song, his song, for your course. I didn't mix it with any guidelines from him. And he luckily was open enough to my interpretation, and we did some radical things that were pretty different from his original multi-track, and he accepted it and loved it. And you know, I think that's generally what a lot of mixers hope for, rather than just being a puppet. I mean, if you're so ingrained with every little detail, you should probably just become a mixer yourself, you know.
Absolutely. I think just to sort of like finish this one up, I feel like it's a similar customer that comes to me, not that I get many of these, but they come to me and they say, how much? First of all, I don't know about you, I don't have a one size fits all. Maybe you can with a label, and you can say this is my label price, but generally speaking, I say send me an MP3 and I listen down, and if it's an acoustic guitar and vocal, I'm not going to charge a fortune. But if it's massively dense, the drums sound really phasey, and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be a lot of work to get these drums slamming and all of that, then I might go a little higher. I think that, to me, I don't know about you, I always think of it in how much of my time is this going to take, as opposed to how complicated necessarily is, because sometimes complexity can be solved quite easily. It's all about, like, is this a 5-hour mix, a 5-day mix? You know, it's like...
Well, what's funny is I've had acoustic guitar vocals take a long time because they're so messed up, you know?
You're sitting there with DSs and dynamic EQs trying to pull out
I'm more just I have a target range, and I just ask them because every independent is different. Some of them have, $500. Some of them have 1,500. Some of them only have 200, and
Yeah.
I have a bottom I won't go below, and then I have a price where I say, how close can you get to this?
Sure.
And they say, oh, I could almost do this much, and then I just decide, yeah, well, I'll do that, or
Okay,
I won't, And one thing that helps is the lower the price, I might schedule it as a bumpable thing. So like if a big deal label mix comes in for $2,000, your project, for 800, we're gonna wait a couple days. I'll come back to it, So,
are you entirely in the box with just a couple of things coming out?
Yeah.
So it makes recallability a lot easier.
The Bricasti, which recalls with the MIDI plugin. So that's almost like it is a plugin, even though it's a conversion. And that's about it. I mean, the plugins are so good these days. I really just use my gear for tracking, and then occasionally the old Transient Designer analog, the real thing. I do still think it's better than a lot of the plugin Transient Designers.
Right.
So I'll occasionally use that. But now drum samples are getting so good. Using Transient Designers less and less,
Okay, I'm going to get through some of these questions here. So Ron says, "Hi Warren and Bob."
Hey.
He has tempted to add his own groove and tell the client send over a mix to listen to Bob's drum mix. This caused phasures if he could have fixed easily. I noticed he grabbed a trigger SN and flipped the BD phase at the end. Grabbed the trigger and flipped the bass drum phase at the end. Oh, he's talking about the last course.
Oh.
Do you remember what you did there?
No, not quite.
Can we go to the...
Let's see. Can you read his thing one more time?
Okay, so Eric's going to have to flick to this quickly.
Okay.
Just click on... We're there.
Okay.
Okay, did that look okay for you?
It'll take 20 seconds to get to me.
Okay, so Ron says, made time today to listen to Bob's drum mix. He has been tempted to add his own groove and tell the client, sent over the mix, said that caused the phase issue he could not fix easily, and I noticed he grabbed a trigger on the snare drum and ended up flipping the bass drum phase in the end. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, let's see what we got here. We got...
So did you added your own groove to this?
You know what, let me listen real quick. It's been so long.
Girl, what you doing?
Vocal wise is fine. I want to hear the music.
You want me to turn the track up a little bit? Yeah, that's a pretty often used sample of mine on tracks these days. Kick drum sample that I added. That was his. This is the tracked version, so I don't have the trigger plugin. This is the version we sent out with the chorus.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what the trigger plugin had on it, but we can...
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what he's talking about, just we flip the phase on the sample that I added. It's just one way is punchy in a different frequency range than the other. As far as the groove, I think it's mostly just balanced differently.
I do know when I was working with Michael Brower on a particular project, he had multiple kick samples coming that were fairly low, that blended in with the drums that I recorded, and he went out for a meeting and we were listening to the mix, and as we left, he goes, if you're not happy with the low end, he goes, just take this sample here and flip the phase on it and it will just tighten it up slightly. And it was interesting because he was using the phase really to kind of control the low end. Now, it was blended about that low against the rest of it, but it was a way of just taking some of the extra flubbiness off it.
Yeah, for sure. I know this mix came out a lot more groove oriented than the original rough mix.
Oh no, it was fantastic.
Yeah. Oh man, it's just been so long since we worked on it. I apologize.
So
We could raise the vocal mic.
A little bit, yeah.
That'll be good.
oh, is
Check,
that
check,
better?
check.
Can you hear us now?
It'll take a sec to get to me, but I'll let you know.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Question: at the beginning of your career in America, how did you find the clients to work with? You.
I've always been in America.
No,
They
but
talk-
the
asking
beginning
you
of
or
your
me?
career.
Oh.
He's just saying America because he's from Russia.
Oh, I see.
So beginning of your career. So how did you find that?
It was really hard, man. The first I moved to LA, I'd been assisting in Nashville, which most people know is a lot of country music, and I kind of got tired of it and came out to LA, and I knew like one person, and he didn't really have gigs for me, and I had some money saved to buy me some time, and I was calling all these studios, and they were all saying like, yeah, you have to start over as an intern at the bottom, and they didn't really care what experience I had. And so I just kind of lived on the money I had saved up, and about 3-4 months in, a friend of mine that was here in town got a call for an engineering gig he couldn't take.
Oh, nice.
Passed it to me, and that just kind of sprouted a tree of people I met. So I went to the studio, I met the studio owner, ended up becoming friends with him and doing many projects with him still to this day. Met that artist for that one session that day, worked with her a couple times. That ended up me meeting R&B singer Brandy and her family. And
I know Brandy well, yes.
yeah, and then I ended up working with them, and it's just like a tree. You meet one person and you start a good relationship with them, you work with them, and they recommend you to the next person.
You also do good work.
Yeah, you gotta do good
You got to
work.
do the good work. I think this is. I know that sounds like a very obvious thing to say, but I think there's a sort of belief that he just got there because he knows everybody and connections. It's like no, you've actually got to do really good.
Yeah,
work.
yeah, for sure. But it started out like just one little gig here, and then that person recommends me to this next little gig, and I'm almost starving in between, and then sometime in 2002, about a year later, I met this producer that wanted a day-to-day guy. And,
Right.
He had booked a studio. They called me to engineer. The studio called me to come
Right.
engineer. And he and I hit it off. And he's like, hey, why don't you be my day-to-day engineer?
Right.
And next thing you know, that lasted for 5 years. And not only was I his engineer, I also became his mixer once I proved myself. And
Right.
so at that point, when you work under a producer, now it's kind of up. You're following him, so whatever gigs he gets, you get.
Right.
And that's working for producers is a very powerful thing. You learn a lot. You get to experiment and teach yourself a lot.
Sure.
And you get to work on so many records. We probably in 5 years worked on 1,200 instrumentals and probably a few hundred songs.
It's amazing.
So I mixed every single one of those like a rough mix. So I got a lot of mixing practice in rather than waiting for being hired to mix a record and then being hired to mix a record. So every day I was mixing.
Somebody asked me this morning on our latest video about that, and I responded, I was bouncing free and cheap. I was just doing any work I could. And I remember in 99, I was working at this rehearsal studio, and I had ADATs. I had ADATs and a soundtracks console, and it was my home setup I'd put in this rehearsal studio. And in the room next door was the Bangles. The Bangles were rehearsing. They had just got back together since the 80s. They got back together. And they said, wait, do you have a recording studio in here? And it was just like a room about a quarter the size of this. It's like this little tiny thing. And I had 3 ADATs and a little soundtracks console and a pair of NS10s that were only this far apart from each other. So I was sitting like this. And I was like, yeah. And we sort of had a tie line. And I recorded and mixed all the demos for the Bangles album that came out in 2000 that Brad Wood ended up doing.
Such as right place, right time, opportunity.
Definitely right place at the right time, opportunity. But I was paying to be in a room in a rehearsal studio to get into a place, and trust me, it was really difficult. My rent at my shared apartment, 3-bedroom shared apartment, plus the studio rent. I mean, you know, I was making, if I made $1,500, I was living on 200.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and
So you were paying to put yourself into a situation. I've heard of people renting rooms at big famous studios just to be around the clients that walk through the door. You know, run into them in the hallway and kind of, you know, pimp themselves out. And, you know,
I mean, I was playing guitar in bands because, you know, it's like in LA, the scene, I think the scene's still there. You know, you do the $50 rehearsal, $100 gigs. I don't think it's changed. I think it's still that same thing for singer-songwriters. So I was doing like the $50 rehearsal, $100 gigs, maybe one or two of those a week, a couple of demos that were paid, like, you know, one a week, one every other week. And I was just about getting by on between $1,000 and $1,500 a month. Yeah. And like I said, it was like, I had a very, very forgiving landlord who would always wait like a week or two past.
Oh, nice.
But it was tough.
Yeah, it's everybody has a slightly different story, and a lot of them are at the same time are really similar. But
yeah, they're all the same kind of story. Of
it's
like,
a word of mouth business.
Yeah.
So every, like your singer songwriter gigs, playing guitar, someone recommended you. You know, either that or, I mean, you have to be discovered somehow as someone that can back up a singer songwriter. So it was probably a recommendation from a mutual friend or something like that, and that's how it goes. You know.
Yeah, and I had credits.
Yeah.
You know, I had credits and stuff as well. It's like, it is a balance. It is like always.
It never ends.
It never ends.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. This year, this guy John from the Stereotypes production crew called my friend Mansour, asking for a mixer for this project that they were doing, and he needed someone that would mix for a cheaper price but still do a really great job. And because of who it was, Mansour recommended me. I do the gig, and I'm not getting paid an incredible amount, but all of a sudden the project is #1 in 15 countries and #2 in iTunes Pop US.
Did you get a
last
point?
week. I did not, but either way, it's like this late in my career, that's still is happening, you know, where a friend recommends to another friend, you know, and you think like, oh, that guy's been around a while. That doesn't happen. People just call him. It's like, no, you run into people that haven't worked with you or don't know you, and they're recommended you by a friend, and you work with them, and all of a sudden
I think
they're another branch on the tree. You know?
I think people are people as well. I don't think there's like suddenly you, and that's what I hope we do here is break down some of these stereotypes and barriers. People are people. It's like us hanging out talking about music, and working is just the same as you guys and girls sitting at home hanging out with your friends talking about music. It's like we're all just people, and you work with have to be talented and work super hard, and then B, you actually have to be somebody that you want to hang out with.
Right.
You know, it's like sorry, I was a little tough on that guy who was like making a big scene about the fact that, you know, it wasn't synced even though everybody else was synced. It's like, but that shows me something. It's like, you're not going to be able to succeed with those kind of attitudes in this kind of business. You have to be. And I feel like I have to sort of say something like that because, you know, a trolling kind of mentality of always being the guy or the girl that's right about everything is not good. You're not going to get a gig.
I mean, and a lot of
I always tease about the experts. I always go, the experts are the ones that tell you you're doing it wrong, but they're not working.
And I'm not talking about this guy specifically, but that is a young engineer thing to always want to correct people about technical things, and it's also a way of learning, but it also comes off as annoying to some people. But I mean, even
also because they're making an assumption that you don't know.
Yeah,
like I've got to point this thing out to you, and you're like, yeah, I know. That's one of the 5 things that I'm working towards, but I'm not dealing with that at the moment because at the moment I'm working on the kick.
That's why we don't let the artists come to the mix session.
Yeah, like Bob, you need to you need to do de-essing on the vocal. You're like, I know, but let me finish mixing the drums first. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, I don't think you heard. I heard. Like, yes, I know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, personality.
But that's patience. We have to have patience in those situations.
Personality and relationships are such a big part. It's like the skill. Once you're getting paid to do this, and you're working on decent projects and maybe even major label projects, the skill's almost expected, and the personality is what is so much of it. You know, it's like even body odor. Like, you don't want to come sit next to me and I'm mixing and I haven't showered. And,
You mean I should have showered this morning?
It's like,
Hey, let's get it. I think we business the business to
Okay.
death, and that's probably my fault. It always is. Let's try and answer some of these technical questions.
Okay.
Going back to Toby's question about 10 minutes ago, Toby says, what is the difference for you mixing like vocals, like an R&B sung vocal versus a rap? Do you find that you're doing different kind of EQ or etc.?
no.
you treating
Effects.
this-
Effects is what is different.
Okay.
As far as the EQ compression, that is just dependent upon what's going on in the song. The more empty the song is, the less compression I can use, because it's not competing with everything. I
Right.
don't have to hold it in one little spot like you do with a super dense pop mix. When you get into the huge mixes, you really have to compress the vocals so they don't move. But for the most part, besides that, the sound is just, I'm just trying to make it sound like a really expensive recorded vocal. Like,
So
wow,
what's the-
that mic is really nice. Like, I want people to, the reason for that is because I want the voice to be captivating. Like when you listen to Drake records for take hip hop, his voice is so up front, but it's very pleasant and most records very well recorded, and
Right.
it makes people gravitate towards him as an artist. It's
Sure.
if his vocal was sunk in there and not recorded well, less impressive, that would actually hurt his appeal, as an artist. So really it's effects. It's like a rap song, you tend to be drier unless you're occasionally you might use some bigger reverbs, but most of the time you're going to use like a slap delay or no effects at all, or just a doubler. And then on a pop song, you might get into having a delay that's going the whole time. So I'd say the effects change, not the compression EQ
Can I ask a
so
question
much.
about that?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Because I feel like I noticed that in a lot of pop music now, vocals are getting more and more like lazy in a way, if that makes sense. Like it's sung very, very relaxed and like low whispery kind of. Do you find that to be true with pop music rather than like attacking like a vocal part? Because it used to be that pop music was like, nah, you know what I mean? Like really in the groove, and now it's very...
It's
flowy.
just where we are right now. It's a style, like we're not really doing the anthem records
Right.
with the group vocal haze on the chorus, and now we're
Oh dear, what a pity. Never mind.
we're kind of doing this more relaxed, stripped down pop, and I think that's because
Does that present different challenges for how you...
no, if the vocal's a well recorded vocal, it's it's just day in day out work. It's just it's not, I wouldn't say it's different challenges. Maybe like if you have like an Adele, belting vocal on a bridge, you might have to split that track off and treat it a little differently. So maybe that's a challenge or something. But if anything, the lazier the vocal and the more subdued, the harder it is to get excitement out of it. So you have to push the
Well,
fader
because I was
around.
thinking that the S's would be more harsh when it's sung quieter because you're actually having less tone than you would, and like the...
It's
and
just
all that
singer to singer.
Singer,
you know.
yeah.
I've mixed a few singers recently that don't have any S's. It's like, where's the S? Do I need to re-S this vocal? It's like,
And depending, I think that there's a massive. Somebody said to me the other day in one of our streams, I think, that they said that the vocal looked blown out, and I was like, "What do you mean by blown out?" And they're like, "Well, it looks squared off." I'm like, "It's not squared off." And then I realized after like a brief conversation that they'd never recorded a vocal with compression going in.
oh,
So they're used to seeing like these massive dynamics and then like a
right.
and that's increasingly like that. I was talking to somebody, an intern or an assistant at a studio last year that was fresh off the boat from, I can't remember which recording school, so I don't want to.
yeah.
But they're saying they're teaching them now increasingly not to compress on the way in and do it all in the mix stage. And so I think probably when you're dealing with stuff where there's no S, it's like we're used to hearing a little bit of dynamic control, at least, sometimes between 3 to 6 dBs worth of range control on a really dynamic vocal, which makes your life easier. It pulls up, it's closer to it.
Absolutely.
And so you're used to hearing the S's because of the S's, if the dynamic range has been reduced by 3 to 6 dB, the S's now are going to be, significantly louder.
Absolutely.
It's tough for me and to talk about that because I feel like it's such a different way of recording to the way that you and I grew up.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like I used to talk to engineers about drums in that regard. So it's like, should I EQ and compress drums to tape? And every mixer, when I was an assistant and engineer tracking, they'd be like, no, just let me do it. You just record it bare bones, and I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And because they're afraid I was going to screw it up.
Yeah.
So from that regard, it's like if you don't know how to use a compressor, don't use it. Just record it low and we'll deal with it. But yeah, I mean, you should learn because even in the headphones for the artist, if a little bit of dynamic control is there, it's going to possibly help them to perform it better.
Absolutely, yeah.
If they all of a sudden belt and the headphones, all of a sudden blare in their ear from their own voice, it's going to affect their performance. So learning to use a compressor properly for tracking is important.
See if we can get through some of these.
Okay.
Like Tom's the next question says, if you have a singer and they nailed their part, but they want to redo it again, what do you do?
I'll hear them out. So I'll save the take, do a new playlist, let them sing it again, and then I'll bring them in from the booth and play them, both of them, and then we'll argue.
George over in Germany says, in Deutschland says, how do you deal with 3 people in the band who have different ideas of how the final mix should be, how it should sound? Do you offer your own and then let them discuss it?
So I would relate that because I don't mix a lot of bands these days anymore, but we'll have same thing happen with the manager and the artist themselves, and then the producer, and then the A&R guy. And what'll have to happen is you basically just tell them, why don't you guys get together, hash out your notes, get them all the same, and then send me one set of notes.
Right.
And then sometimes you just have to go with who's paying the check, so right. If it's an indie project and it's, you have an artist and they're paying for it, and it's like, you got to make them happy, so if there's a producer and they paid the producer for the track, it's like, he's kind of secondary now, his opinion, he's not footing the bill. This artist wants to be happy. They hired you. They called me. I'm going to honor them. But with a band, you got the bass player wanting the bass louder, the guitar player wanting the guitar louder, the drummer wanting the snare louder.
Sure.
You just, at that point, you can either point them to a reference and be like, hey, listen to this record. The snare's not that loud. We need to bring it down. Or just leave the room and let them argue and, fight it out until they can come to an agreement and then approach you with that, those notes,
Marvelous answer. Lots of people are asking variations of this question, so I'm going to try and sum up. I see Asha, Ben, Fidelity. Lots of people are asking questions about pricing and work and all this stuff, which I think is really really important. I'm going to sort of answer this, and you can add to it.
Okay.
I feel like for you, all of you out there that are, producing, engineering, mixing, songwriting, whatever, playing in bands, whatever it is, figure out how many dollars, what do you need to make a day? Do you need to make $250 a day? Do you need to make $150 a day? Do you need to make $500 a day? What do you need to make to be able to make this a living? And then when you're quoting on work, figure out that working from that point of view.
Sure.
So it means, like, if you think you can mix 3 songs in a day and they've only got $500 budget, take it if you can do it in one day. If you think it's going to take 1 day to mix a song, and your minimum for you to pay your bills and be in a room, quote on that. Think about it in those terms, because people are asking, what's the standard price? There is no standard price.
There is no standard price.
I've done mixed a song for $500, and I mixed a song for somebody else for $5,000, because one song may take me a week to work on, because it's a 7-minute rock opera with orchestra and everything.
Yeah.
And I've got to pay me, my studio, Eric, everything, all the bills. So I have to
Yeah.
figure out the pricing. Somebody the other day said to me, you know, they were talking about Bob Ludwig, and they're like, how can it be like $450 an hour? I was like, well, have you been to Portland, Maine? He has a massive studio with really expensive equipment,
Yeah.
massive amounts of acquired knowledge. So he's probably making, you know, $100 an hour, and the rest of it goes to pay for all of the stuff. And he's the most successful mastering
Right.
engineer of all time.
Right.
So it's sort of, think about that. It's like that rate is not necessarily what's going in your back pocket. Like you're saying, it's not the old world where you walked into a studio and somebody said, oh, Bob makes $1,000 a day. And that just goes straight into your bank. Now it's like the $1,000 goes to all of this and your assistant and the electricity bills and the rental of the property and everything.
Right. Everything.
So I think for that, so I know I'm waffling on a bit. Think to yourself, what do you need to make a day?
I've seen some younger engineers worry about what they feel they can charge, what they're worth,
Sure.
and that's a hard thing. It's like, I think when you have someone approach you and you're not necessarily doing this for a living yet, but you might be making a few $100 a month from it, and you're doing regular sessions and stuff. You want to price yourself so you get continually hired. You get hired again and again, but you're not being taken advantage of. And every time you reach another little step of success, like if you get, you know, you mix a whole band's album and then now 2 other bands are coming to you, you try to inch your price up a little bit. And at the same time, you know, you have those old customers come back to you that helped you get started. You maybe give them a break, you know, and it's different on so many different levels, you know, like once you get to where Warren and I are, you know, we have a reputation, and we also have other guys on our level that are charging a certain rate. We don't want to be too far off from what they're charging. So, like Warren said, there's no standard. You know, guys mixing hit records every single day could be charging $6,000 per mix, and then there's guys that haven't necessarily had hits, but they're working on major label projects and they're charging $1,000 a mix. You know, and you just have to, you know, just pick a rate that won't scare your clients off, but makes you feel like, you know, you do all this work and you feel when you get that check that it was worth it, you know. Also, aligning yourself with good projects is important, not just taking every little thing that comes through the door. You know, you want to be sure it's something you feel comfortable putting your name on, you know. So it's a hard thing, but whatever your clients can afford, if you're just starting out and you have people that are willing to pay you $100 a mix, and you've never made that much on a mix, then that's fine. That's your rate, you know. But 2 years from now, you might be trying to push it to $250 a mix, $300 a mix. There's no real answer. It's kind of you know, every individual's situation. I know guys that are not making what they should, and I know guys that are probably making more than they should, you know.
Absolutely. So I have no, this is absolutely fantastic stuff. So firstly, I don't know. One of the things that we're touching upon here is, like, you've done a lot of courses with us now. Have you done 4 or 5?
Maybe even 6.
Maybe even 6.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
We've done a full production course as well, which we did over 3 days, filmed here.
Yeah.
And I think it's like a 10-hour course. That was like an indie pop song. Mm-hmm. We've done this, which is more R&B pop. We've done something which was more hip hop. We've done a ton of different stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think to answer how you mix the vocals, we're going to do a bundle of all of his courses in one go. I don't know if Sam is going to put up the link. Is Sam watching? Can you text him? But we've got a place where you can buy all of his courses at a massively discounted price. And I'm sorry to be all salesy, but I think it's going to answer a lot of these questions. I know a lot of you here already have the courses. I see a lot of people here, but for those of you who don't, we're going to do a bundle price of the whole thing. So let's keep... So hopefully somebody's going to put that link up for us now. I'm going to keep going through these questions. Jerowin, I don't understand your question. You're a great follower of ours, and I really respect you, but I don't understand what exactly you're asking about drum kits versus snare drums versus samples and stuff. Is there a better way you can ask it? I'd really like to answer your question. Jerowin's like this fantastic guy in the Netherlands. I know he's a big fan of yours too, and I know you as a drummer. I'm sure you guys could talk a lot.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, I think while you're looking through that, like if you guys look through these different courses, you're gonna see my approach really similar. Like there's a compressor. A lot of times the CLA 76, then a de-esser, then a multi-band or something like that, then an EQ, then maybe a specialized EQ, and then at the end maybe another de-esser. And I do that so often. So styles, rap, pop, blues, smooth jazz, whatever it is, it's going to be the same plugins. It's just going to, and it's not really even the genre that dictates what I'm going to do. It's really just that particular vocal, how it was recorded, how well the mic suits the singer. That's the biggest thing with recording that doesn't really get handled these days because everyone owns one mic. But back in the day, we used to put up 3 mics and see which one fit the singer the most, and half your work is done right there, So
JMB Mixing says, do you have any tips for pitching to new clients?
That's the hardest thing, man. And
like if you hear something and you really want to be involved, what do you do?
The best thing I've had happen is always have someone else speak for me, because when I try to pitch myself to somebody, I don't know how to do it well. I'm not good at that. It's like I can't. I'm not a salesman of myself. I've never been good at that. And if I can call my manager and say, hey, I really want to work with these people, can you start investigating? And then she'll go through, like, just do some research and try to maybe reach out to their management and maybe send a cold email. Sometimes, friends just saying, someone stops by for a session in the next room and I'm hanging out and, my buddy's producing on it and he says, oh man, you got to use Bob to mix your record. He's so good, That's always been the most powerful thing. Like me, myself, cold calling a client or reaching out to somebody I want to work for, it almost never works because it just comes off, I don't know, if it's somewhat desperate, but they feel weird that you're asking them for work rather than one of their good friends saying like, man, you really need to use Steve over there. And that's more, you're going to feel that's more honest and like, wow, maybe I should check out Steve because Bob's really talking him up. Rather than Steve coming to you and be like, hey, hire me.
Right. I think it depends on the level of the client. I think for maybe I think when it's a local band, I used to go to shows and like just if I liked a band and hold out my hand at the end and come up and say, hey, my name's Warren, I really like your band, I'd love to do a song with you. I understand if you don't have a budget, I'll do a day with you for free. Let's see if it works out. And I learned that the hard way. And then when I started working with Dave Jordan, he told me that's how he got all of his work. Dave Jordan got all of his work by doing a song for free. And he said not only did he do a song for free, he did a song with no paperwork, which is sort of goes against like, I think this is a big disconnect. A lot of the older school guys, because I've heard a lot of them talk about this, they all go, don't work for free, don't do this, always get contracts done. You know how difficult it is when you're up and coming, how difficult it is to get a $1,500, which is a cheap lawyer's contract done for a gig that might pay $1,600. It's just the reality. It's like, if you can do a song in a day for $1,500 tracking, you're going to take it. Are you going to give your lawyer do the contract on it? It's like, it's so difficult. You can have standard agreements. I will say that my lawyer has told me if it's in an email, it's pretty much will stand up in court. So it's really good if you get communication going with an artist and they are interested in working with you. Send an email which says, hey, do you agree to these basic terms that if you release this, maybe I'm going to get paid X number of dollars on the back end. Maybe I'm going to get a percentage of the royalties. Something, even if it's loose, just something in writing that makes some kind of sense and have them agree to it.
Oh, you're talking maybe more production and writing stuff?
I think mixing as well. I think mixing as well, when you can. Just definitely, because sometimes mixing is more than mixing, which is going to answer another question that Martin has about, do you find yourself adding production to make the mix great?
As far as breaking out instruments and stuff, very rarely, and if I do, very cautiously sneaking them in so that it makes my life better as mixing, but maybe they don't notice it.
Yeah.
Like new drums, new guitars or something. I've replayed people's guitars before to get a better tone, but it was such a simple guitar part, like just diamonds, whole notes.
I do rakes all the time, yeah.
They would never know.
Yeah.
But I got a way better amp sound, you know.
Yeah.
Drum samples all the time, and if they have a problem with it, I can undo it in 10 seconds, you know.
I learned the hard way mixing a hip-hop song that I put drum samples in, and they're like, what are you doing?
Right.
This is my production. You just changed my production. I'm like, no, just...
That's the other thing. You have to tread carefully depending on who you're working with, you know. But one thing I'll go back to that last question is spec mixes. I've definitely done stuff where someone isn't sure about hiring with me because they're not familiar with me, and I'll be like, well, let me do the mix for you. I'm confident that I'll do a good job. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. You don't have to pay me, you know. So that's another tactic for getting clients is you can offer to have them audition you, you know.
Right. Toby says he listened to the latest Lupe Fiasco album, Drogas Wave, is that right? Which Bob mixed on. Says, really good album, very impressive, enjoyed it a lot.
Oh, awesome.
Great.
I think I have 2 on that album.
Was it fun to do?
Yeah, Lupe is great to work for. He's such a nice guy.
I think you've been answering the client one. Alexi's asking about how to find clients. The question at the beginning of your career in America, Alexi's in Russia, did you find the clients to work with, or do you have a name already in America? I think we covered that as well. Clint says, where did you get all these diffusers? Did you make those yourself?
We made those.
Made them himself.
And never again.
Never again.
I went crazy making those.
Yes, Sean, we are at the Echo Bar. I'm trying to get through these as quick as possible. Is everybody hearing us properly? How did you get that gold fader?
Oh, so on Pro Tools Native, they don't have these gold faders. On HD Native and HD, they have them, and what they are,
so it's the HDX.
They're trim faders. So what you have is,
can we just get you over to the? We'll get you back to webcam.
Oh, I see. We got to switch that
to Pro Tools. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you have a track and you've done a bunch of automation moves, just really crazy. We'll just draw some craziness in here. And then you put it on trim down here. So now what happens, I'll show you this real quick, is you play the song, and you know what, we don't even have to hear it. Oh, they won't hear that if I take that off. Okay. So now as you're rolling along, you're going to do a bunch of moves, but it's going to keep this general shape of all these other moves you have in here. It's just going to turn it down. So I can just pull this down, and you see the new red line that it's creating. So it kept that shape. It just trimmed it down a few dB. So that's what the trim faders are all about, and it's Pro Tools makes that an exclusively a HD or HDX thing.
So you don't have trim in native?
Not in pure native, no.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's just a few things that Avid doesn't have in native, and I guess that's the only way they can justify the price difference, maybe.
Right.
You know.
Oh, it used to be like the LE version and Mix Plus was so different.
Right.
And then when HD came out, you're like HD and native, like it was almost identical, but the price difference was still massive.
Right.
And I remember thinking, wait there, so I can spend like $1,000 and get everything that I have to get my $20,000. What I mean, I don't know about you. I think I spent over $20,000 on a mix bus system, and then like $30,000 or $40,000 on an HD system.
Yeah, I never had a mix bus system of my own back then, but because I was just starting out. But my first,
what he's saying is like I'm older than him. Just be clear here, okay? That's code for Warren. You're older than me. You started on Pro Tools before me.
So my HD rig was 29,000. I remember exactly.
29,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think mine was like probably the same price, like 30. Because I remember I had to upgrade. And I talk about this a lot, and I love waves, but I remember I bought platinum in the mid '90s, and it was
like $6,000 or $8,000 or.
I can't remember if it was 7,995 or 6,000.
Well,
but
now Mercury's $11,000 or something.
yeah, but you can get it native for about $8.
Right,
You know,
$8.
when they do the sales, you know. Look, I love waves.
They do have a lot of great sales.
I mean, half your plugins there are waves. I can see. I can see an L1, and you know, we're still the Ultra Maximizer. I mean,
Waves is the
it's
the
the
thing.
most consistent plugin that people use, and there's loads of great plugins. But let's be honest, it's there on everything. Do you ever watermark? Do you ever watermark proof files that you send to clients?
I don't. Yeah, I don't. The thing is, I if it's a major label, you don't have to worry about stuff like that. There's nothing fishy going on 99% of the time. And if you're with indie clients, I always get a 50% deposit. So,
That's what I do too.
And the thing is, with the 50% deposit, if they've paid 50%, it's pretty likely they're going to pay the other 50.
Yeah.
When you don't get any money up front, that's when you got to worry about watermarking and fading your song out early so they don't have the whole thing. And
That's exactly what I said in my video today. It was like, try to get the 50% up.
yeah, it's just number one. The worst thing is when they cancel the day of, and now you have an open studio and you're not making money. That's not really fair. So you get that 50% deposit, they're locked in. You're going to work that day, so it's good for everybody. You know, it's good for them. It shows that they're going to be honest with the money, and it gives you something. If they do take another week or 2 weeks to pay the other 50, at least you got something. You're not waiting for the whole 100%. You know. So watermarking, I don't really mess with.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's something. There's certain discussions that I think are like non-discussions that always get talked about. I think the secret is exactly what you just said. It's what I talked about today in our Fact Friday. We filmed it last night, and these guys edited it for the morning, just for those of you watching. Yeah, always take a deposit up front. Actually, when I'm on an album project, depending on the artist, but if I'm hiring a lot of people, I'll do thirds.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll get a third on day start of, preferably before. Have to have a third paid before we start. So if somebody's coming to me to do pre-production, you've got to pay a third. Then in the middle of the tracking portion, that's not correct. At the end of the tracking portion, I expect the other third, because I've got a bass player and a drummer and maybe a guitarist I'm hiring outside of me.
Right.
You know, it's like Tim Pierce, Sean Hurley, you know, Blair Sinter or Victor Andrizza. If I got those guys of that level, I need another third.
Right.
Because those guys are some of the best in the world, and they're usually on at least $1,000 a day, and they're cutting 3, 4, 5 songs a day. So they are worth it, and they are phenomenal players. So you need to pay me the second third. That's what I say to my artists, and also Sunset Sound, I've got to pay the studio.
Right.
If I've only got half up front, it's not really going to cut it, because my expenses might be at least, maybe more, 2/3 of the whole budget.
Right.
So you don't want to be set in a situation, and I've had it happen to me one time before, where you're literally out of pocket before you come to mix. You know, you're sitting there, you're going, I took $10,000, I've paid 15.
Right.
It's happened to me, and so for mixing, definitely 50-50. 50 on the front, 50 on the back end. I think one of the fears that people have is that if they send a wave, that the client might just go, hey, it's done. Well, for me, there's a couple of ways around it. First of all, I always fake master to get level up. So if they want to use that, great, but it's never going to be as good as using a real mastering engineer. When I get sent to Adam Ayen or, you know, one of those great mastering engineers, I leave enough room in there for them to do their stuff. So if they do want to steal it from me and use it, well, they're not going to get the best result anyway, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if I can understand, like, certain people just starting out, they might be working with some super indie people, and maybe they're not the most honest people.
Yeah.
And if you can't get paid anything up front, or even you do get your 50% and you're worried about getting the other 50, then go ahead and watermark your stuff or do something, or fade it out early. I used to just fade stuff out after the second chorus, because if we're talking about mixing, they're going to get the gist if the mix is decent at that point, and they can go ahead and pay, and then you can remove the fade. But
So Devin's
Try
saying,
not to work with those people if possible.
yeah, and when it happens, and it will happen to every single person ever, you know, $29,000 is what you meant by democratization. I'm not sure what that in reference to an HD system. Yeah, we're talking in 2003 or 2004.
Yeah.
We're not talking 2019. 2000. I think you're sorry, Bring Me Sunshine. You're sort of missing our point. We're talking about 15 years ago. That's what it took, and that was when labels had budgets.
Yeah.
There was a time Pro Tools engineers used to get paid for themselves and for the gear that they brought.
Yeah. I used to charge people to send my gear to the studio. It would sit in a warehouse in racks, and I would say, I'm going to record plant, send my gear over there, and they would pay $300 to have it delivered, and then the next day picked up. And then they would pay me $125 an hour to record vocals. You know, those are the good old days.
It's the good old days. It's all gone. All of that stuff is gone. There is, you know, the difference now between you know what we're doing and what most people are doing is huge. It's it's the opposite. There is no difference now. It's sorry to sound twisted my words. What I mean, like, your budget is the budget, and I think that's also important as well for artists that you're working with them, for them to understand that, you know, you're just charging what you charge because you have your own expenses, and that's the way it is. Now, I don't pay cartage anymore. If I'm hiring a great drummer or something like that, it's rare that we have a budget for cartage.
Right.
So basically, they have their drums in storage. They have to pay for somebody to do it, and they're getting it out of their day rate. And Devin, there is no one size. I mean, talking musicians, yeah, sometimes you can charge $1,000 a day for them to play on your record. Sometimes it's a lot more. Sometimes it's a lot less. If it's a union job, they'll pay double scale for the leader and then single scale for the others. There is no one size. I think that's. It's very difficult to talk about money because people just assume that it's the same principle now as an independent producer working with indie projects as working with major label. Everything is just how long is it going to take you? Think about it those times. I think for everybody, just to reiterate, think about what you need to make a day, and then how long is it going to take for you to do the project.
I won't mention him by name because I'm going to talk about his price, but one of my favorite guitar players I use is $300 a song on an indie project. Sure. And that includes anything electric and anything acoustic. And I love using them, and $300 for a song is great for him. And of course in LA there's guys that charge 3 times that amount or more, you know. Yeah,
and then actually you'd be surprised. I mean, I can't quote a couple of the obvious people prices because it's not fair. Most of the big guys I work with they'll just do hourly.
Hourly, yeah.
And it's a pretty affordable hourly when you've got a musician that's so good that their first or second take might be what you keep.
Right.
So you might end up doing 4 songs in an hour.
Right.
If it's just like leads and overdubs and stuff, and that's pretty amazing.
I call the music business the Wild West because all these questions that you guys have, we're giving vague answers. There's not a definitive this is the way on so many questions.
I think for me, definitely think, and I'm reiterating because I think it's important, think about what you want to charge a day and then how long something's going to take. That, I think, is the best way of working here for everybody. Sure. Scott's asking about the bundles. I don't see anybody put up the bundle links. So it doesn't look like Matt or Sam or anybody's with us. So give me a second and I'll figure that out for you. Okay. Let me, I'm sorry, I thought we had other people on this. Let me ask a question while I sort this out for everybody.
Are you trying to get the bundle?
Yep, okay, trying to have the bundles being placed in the talk as we're talking at the time. I've asked a couple of times already, but I don't see it.
I saw him put it up. Maybe you got to pin it?
I don't see it up here from anybody.
I just put it on there. Oh, somebody else did too.
Okay, great. So we have the bundle there. So I'm actually going to click on it so I can answer effectively. So the bundle is normally $500, $485. We're going to do a 60% off. But I think, I love your photo there of your studio. That's rather pretty. What happened to those monitors? What were they?
I can't see your screen. Which one? Oh, it's the Focals.
Yeah, you're not using the Vocals? I love my
They're right
Vocals. You're just swapping stuff out.
I'm a speaker nut, man. Like, we have 2 new sets of speakers from NAMM, and yeah, we just keep switching them out.
Okay, so it's five things in the bundle.
Oh, cool.
The full producing one, which we normally sell for $250, $247.
That was a crazy experience.
That was 3 days, start to finish, taking a song.
Yeah.
You had no demo of it.
Yeah.
I think we had an acoustic guitar vocal or piano vocal,
Yep.
which talk about going in and out of time and whatever.
Man,
I did no
from-
work with the band before, so
Right.
and I remember I was here the whole time, but I said diddly squat.
Yeah, you're just sitting on the couch.
Yeah, and I was like doing emails and answering questions, and like a couple of times the singer who was Lily would go, "What do you think?" I'm like, "This is Bob's gig, off you go," and I had no input. And to be honest, it's freaking awesome. You did an
I
amazing
mean, it
job. on
covers
that.
so much stuff, from drum miking to what the drummer was playing and guitar parts and picking out the vocal mic and literally everything going into making one song, you know.
Yeah, it was amazing, absolutely amazing, and I feel like that alone is worth its weight in gold because it. And I just put the link back up there because it covers. It also covers like watching you like interact with the musicians.
Yeah, that's true.
What did we end up on the mic?
The Lewitt 940, everybody liked that. We had the Bluebird or the blue bottle, the huge $6,000 one. And the night before, I talked into that, and I was like, "This is the one that's gonna win." It was so amazing.
Yeah,
If I was a voiceover person, I would carry that mic around with me.
because it's like, "Good evening, here is the news."
Exactly. And
My
then
name is Bob Horn.
we had another blue cactus mic, I think, or blue. No, I think it was a cactus. I forget. And then we had the Lewitt 940, and everyone in the room just kind of said, "That's the one." So,
You know, I said this in a private chat with the Academy members. Again, this is private. Now, everybody knows I'm a huge fan of Lewitt, and I got into them because and I know this story is old, but I wanted to buy a pair of 414s, and then when I looked online, I was like, I'm not paying $1,200 a microphone. All I wanted was like stereo, matched pair, overheads, or stereo piano, or stereo rooms. I just wanted another stereo pair of mics. And then I heard about these LCT 500s, and I read that they were like almost zero noise, and they were a matched pair, and that they were designed by the same guys from AKG, because when Harman bought AKG, a lot of the people left. I think it was Harman. Anyway, so a lot of people left. So I was like, okay, I'll try them out. So I got a pair, tried them out, bought them, fell in love with them, and then became friends with them and started like, championing them. Mm-hmm. So Alex Owana is doing this thing called the Audio Test Kitchen, which David's been doing some filming with, and I think we'll be doing some more filming with. And he's doing all these mics in a position, and you guys and girls are going to love this. And he's laser pinpointing every mic in exactly the same place. And he's gain matching every single mic, so it's getting exactly the same. Nice. And he's doing it completely impartial. Nobody is paying him from the mic companies to do this. He has 200 large diaphragm condensers.
wow.
And so I bumped into him like a few weeks ago, and we're going to do some stuff with him because I think it's an amazing concept. I think it goes hand in hand with the artistry with it, but this is the technical, pure technical. And I said to him, what's the most impressive mics? And this is something that I should not be telling anybody, because he's just like, personally, the Lewitt stuff every single time. He goes, it's the most transparent and accurate sounding.
It just works, man. It's like...
And it's half the price.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, that's an impartial, and he's not being paid by anybody. And I probably shouldn't be saying that because it's kind of
that's cool just to hear that. I mean, after
that we're not all crazy.
Yeah,
it's not crazy that people like these mics. RS Audio Engineering says, can you talk a little bit more about your approach to high mids? Do you approach it the same way as a kick-bass relationship and set priorities and cut drastically to give everything its space? I think I like that idea a lot. I mean, that sort of discussion. I think what he's trying to ask is like, or at least this is my interpretation, when it comes to like laptops and cell phones, how do you choose like a frequency maybe to boost and or cut to enhance so that the kick drum is still playing on something like this? You know what I mean?
Well, I don't worry about that too much. What I will do as an afterthought when I check it on cell phones or laptops or these red tones, I'll listen for that stuff, and then I might make a move where I push up a mid frequency, and it's not the same thing every time. I just kind of, because at that point I'm just trying to find something that works with that particular speaker or that particular laptop. So I'll just go on an EQ and just start pushing stuff up that sounds good, and then I'll flip back to my bigger speakers and see if it still sounds good on those. And here actually you can see an exact example of that. So this mid and this higher mid, they were most likely flat on the big speakers, and then when I put it on the ref tones just to make it poke out a little bit, I found these two frequencies that helped. I kind of might maybe interpreted that question a little differently, so I answer it the other way I thought about it. But just in general, working with mids and high mids, it's the first thing I do when I pull up a sound and I add a sound to the mix is I kind of look at it technically, like what's wrong to my ear with this sound, and I fix that. So if there's a resonance at 1.5K or a sharpness at 3K that's really bothering me, I'll pull that out first. And then once I have the sound technically corrected, then I think about it musically and decide, like, how can this fit in the mix? What do I need to move around balance wise with that EQ to make it fit in the mix and also be tonally what I imagine that sound should be. And sometimes what I want out of, like, let's say a guitar, I might tell myself, oh, I really like the bottom end of that guitar to be big, so you know when they're playing the power chords, it sounds cool. But then when I get it in the mix, that's not really working with the mix. So sometimes what I want and what I have to end up doing aren't the same thing. But it's EQing is such a lifelong art.
Switch over to Pro
Oh,
Tools.
okay.
Let me scoot that over.
EQing is such a lifelong art, and every year I swear to myself I'm doing it better than the year before, and I hate records that I did 2 years ago. You know,
What are you finding when it comes to like dynamic EQ? Are you finding is that becoming more and more where you're leaning towards?
I use it a lot. It's dangerous in the wrong hands, but it's so helpful when I try to be disciplined about it. And when I go for that dynamic EQ, I try to really decide, is this a static EQ move or is this really a dynamic move? Mm-hmm. You know.
What are you typically using dynamic EQ on? Things that are really up, like vocals, are you using dynamic EQs?
It could be, yeah. I almost always use them on vocals.
And do you have a preference? I'm just intrigued because I want to steal your I want to steal your tricks.
So there's two dynamic EQs I use. Well, maybe three. The Pro multiband, actually that's the Pro Q. But the Pro MB.
There it is at the end.
Oh.
At the end.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the Pro MB, it's a great one. It's very flexible. It has a mix knob, which is awesome. I love it that it has a mix knob because other ones definitely do not. It's very easy to use. You can sidechain just one band.
So when you're boosting
flexible.
like high mids, etc., before that to get the vocal more presence, then you're using
control
this on
it.
the end to control it.
To control it, yeah. This Pro MB is very fast, and then if I want something that's more gluey and slower, I will use the Wave C6. I don't see one up here, but I'm sure most people know the Wave C6. The Wave C6 kind of glues things together. It's just a slower moving compressor, and it actually kind of sounds like a compressor. If you get 3-4 bands going, I actually end up considering it, you know, a full-on compressor, not just a multi-band. So if a sound sounds too compressed, I'll go here and back it off. Where the Pro MB is very light and touchy, it just kind of feathering frequencies that are jumping out. But the reason I use a multi-band is when, let's say something's too harsh, certain notes or certain lyrics, but it's not all the time too harsh. So you want to dynamically, you know, when the harshness crosses the threshold, that's when you want to hammer down on it. And you don't want to just dull it with a static EQ. So that's kind of how I approach it.
It's pretty fantastic. Jerwin is asking, about like working with drummers and bass players with their groove. Like one guy's behind, one guy's on top, and I was just tell me if you like this answer. I just said I have to make that decision based on time, because sometimes if I'm in a room with young players and the bass player is super ahead of the drummer, I will definitely talk to him about it or her about it. But if we're still on the first song after 6 hours trying to get the groove in, I have to bite the bullet.
Right.
I have to bite the bullet and realize that I can drag it and pull it back a little bit. Is that ideal? No. But again, this is why I think it's really important, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, to have massive skill sets.
Yeah.
To have the ability to know how to edit when you need to, and also how
Right.
to communicate with artists and get the best out of them.
Yeah, there's when
It's a
you're
balance.
producing, you can't always teach somebody a new skill on that session. So if they're always ahead of the beat, they're not going to learn to be lay back or be right on that session. It's
Right.
just it's too much to ask in one day. That's something that they're going to have to practice and get better at. So at that point, you just got to chalk it up to editing and realize you're going to end up.
I remember working with this band in the late 90s, early 2000s called the Pacific. They were like a local LA band, and I spent a long time working with them and then doing the fixes that I needed to do and layering and coming up with this huge expansive sound. And then I had a couple of A&R guys come down to see them play live, and they stayed to the end of the show and they came up to me and I was like, "Oh, what did you think?" And they went, "You made them sound really good, Warren."
Oh my God.
It was kind of the reality. It's like it sucked. I mean, I wanted to get them signed, but
Right.
it's kind of a catch-22. It's like where do you sign up with them? I mean, do you? That's why when we go back to one of our first things about how invested do you need to be with an artist. If you're not managing them, it's really tough, because we want to give them the best possible result. And I think sometimes it is definitely part of our job to impart knowledge and help people.
Sure.
They come in here, they're hiring you because they love your records and they want to know, especially if it's a production thing, how do I get Bob's horns, how do I get a vocal as good as one that Bob Horn recorded on whatever song it might be. And that might be that you beat the artist up to get a great performance, or you realized that was never going to happen and you were going to have to fix it.
Yeah.
Either way, it's...
I'm quick on a session to decide if they're not going to get it, and I have enough practice at that. I'm usually right. So
no, I trust you. Trust me.
rather than beat the artist up on the mic and keep having that sort of take after take after take, after a while it's not going to happen. But the best advice I can give any musician, and you producers to convey this to musicians you work with, is if you're not a drummer, you're a guitar player, you're a bassist, you're a vocalist, you need to study rhythm. And so many don't. They just grab a guitar and strum away. They just grab a bass and they play bass lines. But they need to they need to study rhythm. Rhythm, timing is everything. It's like a record, a mix is better, a record feels better. You can sell more records even by having better timing and better groove,
Also, be an encyclopedia of music. Love music. I worked with a band a long time ago, like 15 years ago, that wanted to be the Chili Peppers. And they sent me some demos, and, they were what they were. It was like demos done in a rehearsal studio. So, things were pretty inaudible and a mess. So I did pre-production with them. It was when I used to be in my old studio, and we had rehearsal rooms. And I go in there and, put in a pair of earplugs and go, "Oh, okay, let's hear some songs," have a chat with them, talk about gear. Okay, off you go. And they start playing funk rock. And we had a couple of weeks of pre-production booked because it was like an album. And like they played 3 or 4 songs back to back, and then they stopped and they're like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Guys, you sound like you listen to the Chili Peppers." They're like, "Yeah, we're huge fans." I was like, "That's nice. Go listen to the Meters. Go listen to the band that the Chili Peppers listen to create groove. You listen to, burn on don't listen to Chad's interpretation of it, because it's basically you're getting one step removed from the source.
Right.
And we suspended pre-production for about a week or two with my involvement, and they all went back to basics. And when we came in to do pre-production again, like a week later, and picked it back up again, it wasn't like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like suddenly they were the meters and they could all lay back when in the right place. But it was a big deal. There's a guy called Charlie Gillett, and he wrote a book for those people who want to check it out called The Sound of the City. And he talked about why heavy rock got quite bad in the late 80s and started getting so stiff. And his point is he said that there was the blues, where all rock comes from, and the Yardbirds, and then John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, then Cream, then Jeff Beck Truth, and then Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple, which were like kind of the trifecta of the British rock bands, all listened to blues to create rock.
Right.
Then he said Aerosmith listened to Led Zeppelin, which I know as a fact, and the Yardbirds, because I work with them and they're huge fans.
Right.
He said then the problem is a Motley Crue listened to Aerosmith. And then he said, like, then everybody listened to Motley Crue, and then you ended up with which is cool, and don't get me wrong, but all of the disappeared, and it started going da 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 da. It all got like. So I think it's important, and the reason why I go off on this long-winded tangent is just to be really educated in music.
Yeah.
So you can help your artist, and you can like point them to, maybe you hear it, you're like, oh, that sounds like, could be even folk. You might be working with somebody like, that sounds like somebody who really, really likes, God, it could be totally oblique, James Taylor. Okay, but James Taylor's rhythm section was the section. It was like Danny Korchmar on guitar, who just had more funk in him than anybody for a white guy. I mean, he's just like, his groove's amazing. He went off to produce Don Henley and all this stuff. I met him last night, and like, Leland Sklar on bass. Talk about a guy that knows how to play behind a bass guitar. So like, even if you're doing folk, there's really good folk music you can listen to. Sweet Baby James, go back and listen to that. Put on a pair of headphones and just be like, there's so much groove going on and feel. I think that this is a big part. I'm sorry to waffle on, but I think it's a big part of what we do is to help educate our artists and ourselves to bring that to it.
I mean, if you're a singer, don't just listen to vocals on records. Listen to everything. If you're a bass player, don't just listen to the bass. Listen to the drums. There's been so many times where I have to tell a young bass player, when you pluck the string, if it's on a beat where there's a drum, try to hit with that drum at the exact same time. Tightness just makes the record sound so much better and makes it easy to mix.
I agree entirely. It's a really, really massive point.
I mean, I think that's why live music versus program music can be harder to work with, because it's looser.
Right. Alex says 99% of the time for him it's working with the artist and getting the take to be good. Absolutely. And we do agree with that entirely. I think we're just coming back to our time management thing and understanding, because lots of people wrestle with the idea of like how much time and energy and how much should they charge to do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and use the bathroom, and I'm going to have you, Eric, can you go back to the screen?
Is it Pro Tools?
Yeah, go back to Pro Tools there. I'd like to, let's have a look at Fire and Rain, Baby, says Mark. So this is your latest course. Why don't we do like a little bit of a breakdown, talking of vocals, about your vocal choices in the track, like listen to it in the track, and then why you made those choices.
Okay.
And that would be absolutely fantastic. And remember, this whole course is part of a massive bundle that we're doing. And I think one of the biggest things, going back to one of the first questions, is what is the difference between mixing a rap vocal versus a pop vocal versus an indie vocal? Well, you've covered all those genres. So I think, and you've covered all those genres, and they're in all of this bundle.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use the bathroom.
Okay. I'm going to turn this Pro Q2. There's probably a lot of latency right now. I'm going to turn this down. Yeah, it's a lot less. Okay. That way there's not so much latency. So yeah, let's look at my lead vocal. Let's play it a little bit. Start with this verse here. Master Fader.
Hey boy, what you doing loving? This girl won't do the same. Her hands all over your body will go as quick as she can. Listen.
Okay, so this is this is the verse vocal. It's kind of not super soft, but it's a little bit on the soft side. Like I said, I kind of approach most vocals the same. And with every move that you do on a plugin, whether it's a compressor or de-esser or an EQ, it kind of affects something else. And there's a little bit of a tail chasing going on. Especially, I'm pretty heavily processed in my vocals. The less processing you do, obviously, the more natural and less tail chasing you'll have to deal with. But at the same time, I hear a very specific thing in my head when I hear the vocal, and I chase that down until I achieve it. And if I don't, then I kind of regroup and make a different plan of attack. But you know what? Let's bypass his chain. Let's bypass the effects, and let's solo his lead.
Hey boy, what you doing loving? This girl won't do the same.
So I hear some proximity references of him being really close on the mic. I hear some nasally references, and I also hear room. Wherever he recorded, I hear a room tone. And room tones are usually never pleasant, and we're dealing with a mono vocal, so it's not even like a stereo space. It's just kind of an echo in the room, whether he had hardwood floors or just a room that wasn't treated acoustically, probably wasn't in a proper vocal booth. And I know the more I process this, the more that room tone is going to come out. So with this song, I just ended up making that room tone as part of the sound. So with my reverb, delay, any effects I add, that room tone, mono room tone, that's recorded with the vocal, it's just going to become a part of it. So start out with this 1176 compressor.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
So at this point in the song, we're hitting 2 dB, maybe 3 dB at the most. Like I said, he's singing somewhat softly, so we're not hitting the compressor that hard, which is good to not bring up the room tone too much. He does need some de-essing, so add.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
You hear on the watch on the C.
Hey boy, what you doing loving? Hey boy, what you doing loving?
Now, de-essing, the amount of de-essing you do is subjective, but later on I'm going to be brightening this vocal more, so it's okay if I kind of overdo the de-essing and really control it, as long as I don't make him sound like he has a lisp. You don't want to mess up the pronunciation or make him sound weird. A lot of you may not know this plugin. This is fairly new, Golfos. It's an automatic EQ. It searches for phase relationships that might be bad and resonances, and it kind of automatically attacks those. Let me show you what I mean.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
So I hear like kind of a few, those of you that know your frequencies, like a 600, 400 to 600 kind of area that's not pleasant, and then I hear a proximity on the low end. Let's see if this will take.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
So it's not getting the proximity too much, but it is taking care of some of this mid-range references. And this is just a great tool to use. Number one, it's dynamic, so it follows as he changes notes, the frequencies shift.
Hey boy, what you doing loving? This girl.
You can see on girl, it hits right there. This is probably like 500 hertz, maybe 450, somewhere in there.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
maybe 600 at the highest. It's not really labeled, but it sounds like it's right in there. So next we have the Pro Q2.
Hey boy.
All right, so that same area that the Golf Floss was hitting, I went around 500, but fairly wide. So I'm going all the way up here to 1600, 1500, somewhere in there. My center is 500, and then we're kind of coming down all the way to 200. So that's another thing you got to remember when you're EQing, is that you're affecting frequencies next to it. So the more I pull this down, now I'm actually affecting that 1600 a dB or two, you know, by pulling this down so far. But I did pull that down a little extra. Here's that proximity.
Hey boy.
The cool thing is you can see it right there with the Pro Q2. They show.
Hey boy.
It's that hump down right there. So I chop off any sub stuff that we don't need in the vocal. Doesn't look like there's much, I don't think. Let's bypass and find.
Hey boy.
Well, yeah.
Hey boy.
So we got frequencies all the way down to 10 hertz, and they are -12.
Hey boy.
That's pretty loud. We don't want those in there, so definitely going to chop those off. Tame our proximity, pull down that mid a little bit. Now the problem with, let me bypass these. Once we're pulling down these kind of lower mids and then the upper bass and then filtering, we're going to expose these nasally frequencies now. These are now going to be more prominent because of the work we've done down.
Hey boy.
So now you.
Hey boy.
And this over.
Hey boy.
Without me pushing these up, they've become louder. I mean, technically, whatever you didn't lower is now louder, technically. So these two stuck out to me as now that I've done these. Now I'm kind of, this is what I'm talking about, chasing your tail. I've done this work, which was important to make the vocal sound better, but now it's exposed these, and now I have to take care of these. So a little bit of chasing your tail, but pop these frequencies.
Hey boy.
And I've kind of put it back to where it was before I did these frequencies. So a little bit of extra work, but you know, I want this vocal to sound rich and cool, sound like it's done on a good mic. Still haven't compressed too hard because I'm being cautious of that room tone.
Hey Bob.
Yeah.
There's a good question here. Alex Common is asking, how did you find those spots in the EQ just from listening and knowing your frequencies?
Yeah, it's practice over many years. I mean, when I was in college, I did a bunch of ear training. I literally bought a dual 31 band EQ from a pawn shop, and I put it in my stereo, and I would play songs and just boost 500 hertz and listen to it for like 2 minutes, and then cut 500 hertz and then boost 2K and listen to it. And I did that for like 2 years in college. And then, of course, mixing records over and over again. I think a lot of people just have this technique when you're learning your frequencies. And even some days you're just not tuned in. You don't know what frequency it is. You might know the general range, but you do this boost and sweep thing.
Hey boy, what you doing loving this girl?
So I boost it. I can kind of hear this thing that's annoying me, but I don't. If I didn't know my frequencies so well, I just kind of boost and sweep.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
So this whole area kind of bothers me. So now I got to make a decision how I'm going to treat it. Am I going to do 2 cuts? Am I going to do 1 wide cut? And again, remember, if I had done 1 wide cut instead of these 2 little ones, trying to get that whole area covered, now I'm affecting up here a little bit, up here a little bit. I'm kind of removing a lot more than I need to be, so that 1 cut is more damaging than these 2. But yeah, I found them just by ear. It's just practice over the years, and again, you can sweep around if you're still learning your frequencies. But yeah, I highly recommend just take time every week if you're not in tune to frequencies that easily. Just put up a stereo mix of any song and just move an EQ around, boost it, put it on a number, 1000, 1K, boost it up, pull it down, just get like teach your ear those frequencies, and it'll just start becoming more where you nail them. Like you'll hear like, oh, that sounds like 450, and you go to dip it and you were right, you know. And that's important. The more accurate you can be with your frequencies, the more natural and less processed your mix will sound. So 3 plugins left. We got, this is Brainworks, the Lindell, was it TLTE 100? Very rare. The hardware unit was very rare. I never saw one, and I've worked in probably 150 studios in the States. I've never seen one of these.
I've never seen one of those in my entire life.
Right. Rafa Sardina is probably the only guy that's ever seen them. He owns like 3.
Maybe he owns all 3 of them.
He has all 3 of them that were ever made. But it has a really nice high boost to it. This 10K sounds really sweet. That's one thing that I've learned is the sound of different plugins. You know, you pull up the Wave Shep 73. That 12K sounds its way. You pull up the Puig Tech and put it on 12K, it's a whole different sound, you know. So these plugins have their own algorithms that make the sound different, and this 10K and this 6K on this high boost is really sweet sounding. So when I want to add some air or open up a vocal, I go to this plugin fairly often. It's hard to explain if you don't know this plugin. Watch a YouTube video on it. The whole mid-range band is very.
So can I ask you a little bit about your process? Are you essentially making sure that the vocal is even sounding? There's no 1 or 2 frequencies like sticking its head out. Then applying more global air to the vocal afterwards.
Yeah, so I do technical first. What do I think is wrong with this vocal? It's nasally. I fix that nasally.
Yep.
It's got proximity. I tighten that boominess up.
Yep.
And then like now, how do I want it to feel tonally? How do I want it to sound musically? Well, we want this a warm vocal, so you know I'll work on making it warm. Now that proximity is handled, or I want it to be an open airy vocal. So now it's more of a less technical and more broad, like you said.
Right.
And this is definitely what that is.
You feel confident because you've controlled areas that, you know, are too excessive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can leave these next few plugins off, and I've technically fixed this vocal. We can put it in the mix. It'll sound fine. It'll just kind of be a flat vocal, nothing special, you know. So now it's time to make it special with these last few plugins. So the Lindell is definitely one of them. Let me pop this. You know what? We have it soloed. I'll just pop it in and out.
Hey boy, what you doing loving? This girl won't do the same. Hey boy, what you doing loving? This girl won't do the same.
So very, very nice sounding EQ. We're not doing anything drastic. We're just kind of, you know, making it a little sweeter. So this next EQ, this is one of my favorite EQs, the Metric Halo channel strip. I wish they would make just this really big. But it's one of my favorites for just notching out frequencies and carving something up. So what this is now fitting it in the mix with the music. What stands out as needing to be cut. I do a lot more cutting than boosting. Boosting is more musical, tonal, fun EQ, and cutting is more surgical, get rid of that, it's in the way kind of EQ.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and I'll mention the last plugin. It's just a de-esser. Now that I've boosted that high end on the Lindell, there'll be a few S's that are just a little too airy, so I just tap on it with the.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
So you see that's just a little bit of 2 dB, and this de-esser.
Hey boy, what you doing
That's around 4 dB. But funny enough, to my ear, this Waves de-esser, no matter where it's set, it's set at 5500, 5K, and that's where it seems to be working. But this Massey de-esser, even though it's set really low to 2.5K, it seems to be really good at taming really high S's, like 10K and up there. So this is kind of counteracting, but not all the way, our Lindell EQ. So back to this Metric Halo channel strip. I'm going to put this in the mix now. Or you know what? Maybe it'll be helpful to pop these in first, one at a time, before we put it in the mix. And you can see there's some subtle stuff going on here. Half a dB at 1K. That's definitely a in the mix decision, not really a corrective tonal decision. And then here's another almost half dB at 390. That's some, oops, I messed that up. That's some warmth, you know. So let's pop these in one at a time. We have these 5 bands.
Hey boy, what you doing loving this girl?
So that's more of that proximity, but a little bit, no, yeah, maybe a little bit lower frequency, but pretty close to what we were doing earlier.
Hey boy, what you doing loving this girl?
So that's taking care of that. Then we have,
Hey boy, what you doing loving this girl?
it's just kind of a hollow range that we're adding that in. Let's hear it in the mix.
Hey boy, what you doing loving this girl? Won't do this.
Now I realize how subtle this is. Let me make this a little more.
Hey boy, what you doing loving this girl?
So I'm just trying to fill in, like I said, it's like less than half a dB. I'm just trying to fill in a little bit of 2 scooped of an area. We don't want the vocal to sound thin or harsh. If you dip out the 300-400 area too much, your vocal's going to sound piercy and harsh.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
So this is a little resonance that has a little bit to do with the room tone, but it's
That's about 650 or something.
what is that? That's yeah, 673. Good ears.
Well, I think that's a that kind of frequency is something I hear a lot in rooms, and just in vocals is one of those frequencies that can be really annoying.
Well, what's funny is when you get up around 600 and above frequencies, you can literally 600 hertz is about 8 inches wide, so the up and down wave, you know, the cycle.
Yeah.
So you can have a music stand next to the microphone, and the voice is hitting that and causing a boost at 600. You know.
Yep.
So when you get above that 400 hertz range, physical things in the room start to change the sound of the source. You know. So next we got the pinchy 2K area.
I also feel like those. I don't know if you. I've noticed a few people send me vocals and they're using those shields.
Yeah.
And they're causing more issues than they're actually.
They can, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Not a big. I don't really get those shields. If you're gonna deaden where the mic is hearing, not where it's not hearing. So like, put yourself in like a vocal booth so it's dead behind you.
Yeah.
That's gonna do
Put up
a
a
lot
couple
more good.
mattresses in the corner.
Yeah.
And stand between them. So earlier on the Pro Q2, we had dealt with some mid-range frequencies, 1.6 and 3.1. And it looks like with the Metric Halo, I put one right in the middle. It's just a decision I made later in the mix rather than when I was dealing with the Pro Q2. This could have been 20 minutes after I had done the Pro Q2, you know. So I just heard 2K and got.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
It's definitely a sharper Q than in the Pro Q2. And then now with all this scooping, most likely I'd felt like I was losing a little bit of mid-range presence, especially on like cell phones and laptops. So half dB at 1.6K, but somewhat wide, not a notch. It's more of a wide band. You can see even up here it moves, so it's really wide. And that's just to kind of pop the vocal more forward. And
hey boy, what you doing loving this girl?
again, let me do it dry.
Hey boy, what you doing loving?
So, and then again, our last processor was the Massey de-esser. So now that's pretty much the vocal chain, except I did do a parallel vocal with the CLA and limiter. Lots of waves plugins going on. Love the waves. So this is basically just, since we didn't really hammer down hard with the compression on the actual vocal, this is a parallel where we're probably,
Hey boy,
yeah, really hard, 10 dB.
hey boy, what you doing, love?
And then on top of that, we're doing about 4 dB of limiting. And this is the verse. This is the soft part. He's not even singing forcefully.
Hey boy,
And you can see the fader relationship. That's just mixed in slightly
And this is
less.
the parallel, right?
Yeah, this is the parallel. So
Did you solo the parallel? Is it possible to hear it?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can just take the main one out of the mix.
hey boy, what you doing, loving this girl?
I mean, you can see the dynamic range. It's
Absolutely. What's in
Hey boy,
is adding room.
It does bring the room up.
Bring up the room, yeah.
I talked about that. I was being careful on the main vocal not to over compress because of the room that I heard in the mic.
Right.
And here it all is in the parallel. But the parallel, what it's important for is just keeping it in your face. So let me I'm gonna
So what's
mute it.
interesting, I wonder if he was singing into a shield that was causing that extra 650 to come back in. And behind him, he didn't have any baffling.
Right.
So you got the room.
Got the room. Yep.
Yeah.
And then
It's
the
a good
more you
lesson in
process
that
it, the more you process it, the more you're gonna hear that room. That's
Yeah.
why we have the booths. It's like you put up a mic in your bedroom and it sounds fine. But that's because you haven't put a bunch of processors on it.
Yeah.
You know? So let's check
It's a
out
nice
this
vocal, though.
parallel.
Did he? I mean, it's a great performance. Do you know where it was recorded? Was it
I don't.
recorded?
I should ask him what mic and where he did it. I'm gonna pop this parallel in as it's playing in the mix.
hey girl, what you doing, loving this boy? It's only playing games.
So obviously we have a
Huge help.
gain difference because of the additive
Yeah.
fader, but you can see, watch the meters, watch how nice and dynamic this one is, which, you know, we love dynamics, but then this one is just sitting there going nowhere. It's gonna let you hear every lyric, every syllable.
Hey girl, what you doing, loving this boy?
And that's the point of any parallel, whether you're doing it on drums or bass, is to have the one dynamic and the one non-dynamic and blend them together. And it gives you energy, as well as it gives you the sense of that there is still dynamics, but you never lose that
Right.
vocal, you know. And lastly, if you guys want to know the effects, we got a short room here with Reverb 1. That's a classic going back 20 years with Pro Tools. I think, yeah, Avid makes this one.
Hey girl,
So this is Reverb 1.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a short room to give it a space. I want it dry, but dry sometimes is awkward in a mix. Sometimes you need a little bit of space, but you try to make it seem like it's dry. And then this is Timeless 2 by same people that make the Pro Q2 Fab Filter. And we have eighth note delays with a small amount of feedback. And they're just going the whole time, and they're just blended in, almost like a slap.
hey girl, what you doing, loving this boy? So playing games.
And it's filtered. There's the highs and lows are cut, so it's kind of telephone. So all
Hey girl, what you doing, loving?
and I feel like I achieved what I set out for, which was a nice in-your-face present vocal, nice little air, strong bottom end, but not boomy. And that's kind of how I approach all the vocals. And then once it's in the mix, you know, tailor it to the song. If it needs to be thinned out a little bit more, if there's more a heavy pop track with big synth basses and stuff, then maybe you need a little thinner vocal to really sit in there. This kind of funk pop tune has a lot of space for him.
This is such a great song.
Yeah, it's a
really good song, and it's a really good illustration of just like all of the blends. Like your drum sounds fantastic.
oh,
right?
thank you. Thank you.
What are we in the events, or are we on the?
No, don't ever say the word event.
Did I say the event?
Eves.
Eves. Why did I say event? Well, it's like event with an ET.
Yeah.
With an ET. I said
we're,
event.
we're on
Eves.
we're on the Asperger's.
Oh, we're on the Asperger's, yeah. Because when those drums come in, it's like, hey, baby.
I always try to
I don't know why. I
knock
said
people
that.
out with drums, and then I let the
I think
producer.
Eric made me say it. Eric.
I always turn the drums up and let the artist or producer tell me to turn them back down.
That's because you're a drummer.
Yeah. Back to webcam. Yeah.
Great. So once again, here's the everything bundle. Everything that he does, and it's like a 60% discount on absolutely everything. So there you go. I'm going all salesy. Is that good? Do you like that? The
That's great.
salesiness? Yeah. Thank you very
You
much.
have the salesman voice though.
Oh yes. Well, here you go.
Yeah.
This is a sales thing. So let's see what we got. Any last minute questions?
Yeah.
So Bob, would you work with correction on all entities before you make mixed decisions?
That's kind of as I go. If something's really standing out, yeah, I'll go ahead and take care of it. I'll do stuff like cleaning up pops and clicks. If someone didn't do a good job of cleaning up the session, kind of do that ahead of time. But then as far as the corrective EQ type of stuff, that is more kind of as I go.
Alex is asking, do you prefer adding color with compressors or dedicated saturation plugins?
Yeah, both. Yeah, absolutely. Not all the time. I use a lot of Little Radiator by Sound Toys.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a colorful saturation plugin that I like on a lot of instruments, drums, guitars, even occasional vocals. I don't saturate vocals a lot. I just, me personally, I like a more pure vocal. Usually people have to push me to put saturation on it, and but yeah, I definitely use them on drums for sure. I use Decapitator a lot.
Yeah,
I
love Decapitator. I also find
bass. I love a little grit on bass.
I used to end up using SansAmp on that.
Right.
I think that's just because I've been using it forever. Do you like lo-fi?
Yeah, I don't break it out as often. What I like lo-fi for is the actual high-end EQ. So the sample rate, when you pull it down, even to 36,000 hertz, which is super high, it can tame a tambourine, like the really shrill, super high end.
Yeah.
And then if it really needs to be dark, 24,000, which, because it's sample rate, it's so much stronger than like an EQ. But for shakers and tambourines, I use lo-fi. Don't really use it that much on anything else.
I'll sometimes, if it's a rock vocal, go to the saturation and put it on 0.1 on the vocal.
Yeah.
And just adds like a tiny.
Yeah.
And I stole that from Neil Avron. Neil,
Yeah.
he puts it on the vocal.
I like, for vocal distortion, if I'm going to do it, the Thermonoic Culture Vulture by UAD is a really great one.
I have one of those.
Yeah. You have a real one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A red one.
Is it good on vocals?
It's great on everything. we actually put it on. So I did a Joe Perry song for Amnesty International. We did a charity song for Amnesty International, and it was a cover of a Bob Dylan song. And I mixed it on a Neve, and everybody loved it. And then Joe was Joe's like sitting there, kind of like, and I'm like, Joe, you happy with it? He's like, it's too clean. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, it's just too clean. It's not me. I'm a rock guy. You know what I mean? And so Jack said, okay, crack it out. So we got the Fermionic Culture Vulture. We put the mix back through the Neve on a pair of faders. So we got a little extra warmth or whatever from the Neve. And then we did parallel Fermionic Culture Vulture. Like,
of the whole mix?
Yeah, the whole mix. And then like blended it back in. And we just sat there like slowly turning it up, watching Joe's reaction. And it just got to that point where you just started to hear it all starting to collapse a little bit. And he went, that's the one. And to be honest, he's right.
Yeah.
He was right in that situation. It's like, we'd done a really nice mix and stuff. But yeah,
I gotta say,
sometimes
like,
you just need to screw it up.
I mean, I always learn there's a lot of learning that happens from the artist, even if they don't know anything about mixing. You know?
Yeah, especially guys who've been doing it for 40+ years.
Right.
And have worked with people a lot more talented than me.
But even the younger people, they'll
Yeah.
they'll feel something, and it just won't be right. For them. You end up learning something that day. So.
I agree entirely. Hopefully you guys are jumping on this bundle here that we're doing. That would be absolutely fantastic. Do you have questions about anybody that has already bought the courses? Anything specific you want to ask would be really, really fantastic. How do you feel about everyone auto-tuning as part of their vocal editing, whether it needs it or not? I don't know. That's a very
I mean,
very subjective discussion.
Yeah, there's autotune can be very effective when used right, and I don't necessarily mean in a natural sense. You can over process a vocal with autotune and it be very cool and very nice. But what I don't really care for is in, I'm not sure who's asking the question, but
It's AJ.
And
He's a great follower of ours.
okay. We have these songwriting sessions where someone other than the artist will write a song, and that's common all over the world, but especially out here in LA, they're going on all the time. And these songwriters, they just automatically slap on the auto-tune very hard. And what happens is the artists learn about that and they start doing it. And what I don't like about it is when they perform with the auto-tune live, they're fighting the auto-tune all the time. So they hear in their headphones the auto-tune turning them flat, and they start to sing sharp, fighting it. So you record that vocal and bypass the auto-tune. It's absolutely horrible. It just sounds ridiculously out of tune. Way worse than if they just sang without the plug-in and put it on 10 minutes later.
I agree entirely.
So if I record a vocal, if I'm producing something, I try to use the auto-tune very sparingly while we're doing it. Or not at all. I prefer not at all, but some people need that little extra help, and it gives them confidence in the booth, and you want the best performance. So if it gives them confidence, it's important to let them have it. But yeah, it's like those people that just crank it up and sing into it hard. You got to leave it at that point. You can't undo it. You can't do less because they're now horribly out of tune underneath that auto tune.
No, I agree entirely. Yeah, I've done it though. I remember when, especially in the late 90s, I remember having the hardware.
The hardware.
Yeah.
The hardware autotune.
Yep. And you would take the rappers, because it was always the rappers, no disrespect, but the rappers were trying to sing. So you would take like a 4-note and you program in only the 4 notes. I don't know why you, da 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 da, and you put just those 4 notes in, and they would,
Yeah.
You did what you could. But that was printing to ADATs in the late 90s. So it was printed. There was no way afterwards, to put a plug-in on. So you just had no choice.
True.
All you would do is do 3 or 4 takes and then do a comp.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that sounded the least tuned but was closest to it.
Yeah.
Alex says, do you track in a vocal booth? I mean, yes, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. We have 3 booths here, and they're all super dead. There's literally, you don't hear anything on the mic, even if you squash the heck out of it with a compressor. And we built them that way for that very purpose. We just want really clean vocals. I tracked Michael Jackson. He always loved to be in the middle of the big live room with just baffles around him. And I always hated that because I would always hear this little bit of room verb, and I'm just a control freak. I want to control the reverb. I don't want it to already be on the vocal,
Right, absolutely.
But so yeah, I prefer the booth thing. Even here in the control room, we can track vocals with headphones, and if we want to be with the artist while they do it for guidance or whatever. Yeah, super dead spaces, but not super small closets, because those create their own problems.
Right.
Our booth is about 7 by 8, I believe, and it's not square shaped. It's just this weird. It's not even a name for the shape of our booth.
Boz Alvarez said, "Thank you. This is one of the best videos. No kidding. Thank you also very much."
Oh man, cool.
He says he has they say sorry. They have the Bob and Eric bundle.
Oh, cool.
Is there a discount for purchasing the remainder? Yes, there is, Art. If you, I'm going to write this. If you buy the full bundle, email Matt at Produce Like a Pro. I'm writing it down. So this is anybody, by the way. Okay, so so I'm writing down there. So what? Here's the bundle. Everything. If you've bought any of the courses, email Matt at Produce Like a Pro and say, hey, my name's John, Fred, Frida, Sheila, Jake, Bob, David, Eric, Warren, and just say, this is the email address I used to buy them, and we will refund you the difference. Simple as that. That's so basically, cool. Yeah, I want to make sure that anybody that's already bought stuff, this is basically a complete your bundle option. Nice. So, because like a lot of people are saying, they already have everything. So if you don't have everything, so what was the Michael Jackson reference I'm getting asked about? MJ, Michael Jackson.
What was what? Oh, we were just talking about recording.
Yep.
Recording vocals in the middle of a live room rather than in a booth.
Right.
That's how he preferred to do it, and
right.
I've just
did that stuff come out?
No, he passed away before that album could come out.
Right.
Yeah, we worked a few months on that project.
What mic?
U47, I believe, was what we always used. At his house, we rented everything for a whole studio because he didn't want to build a permanent studio, and I think on that trip was M149. But yeah, unfortunately, he passed away, and that stuff will never get released because it was unfinished.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, like I've never been a fan of recording in a big room vocals because you can't ever get rid of the sound of that room once it's there. So if it ends up being incorrect for your mix, nothing you can do about it,
Right. It's a shame it never came out.
Yeah.
That's sad. Yeah, everybody's saying it's sad it never came out. George keeps asking. Sorry, George. I saw your question from earlier. It's about volume. When you're working, do you have certain preset volumes you work at?
For speakers?
Yeah.
No. I different tasks. I work at different levels, and definitely I don't really think about it too hard. One thing I am conscious of is not listening loud for too long.
Right.
And if I am doing a task, like let's say I'm waiting on the computer for something, but there's music playing, or I'm editing toms, I'll turn it down extra low, just to give my ears a break for that 10 minutes or whatever, and then turn it back up when I need to. But I monitor at a lot of different volumes. I know some guys pick a volume and stick to it. I'm all over the place, quiet, loud, super quiet, and then also different speakers. We have everything from the old iPhone 5 earbuds, which millions of people own, so those are good. Ref-Tones, 5-inch speakers. We have so many sets of speakers. Speakers off to the left. I have this little $100 Bluetooth Sony speaker. And we mentioned at the beginning the Audrey IO plugin that streams to your cell phone, so we check there.
Fantastic.
Everywhere. Yeah. And all
That's
different
amazing.
levels.
Bob said 80% of mixes he does do not get released. Did you say that?
Yeah, and it's not that they don't ever hit the internet. It's they never reach hundreds of thousands or millions of people.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
So
they'll get put up on SoundCloud.
And what that comment is in reference to is that so many artists don't know what to do with their song once they leave the studio.
Right.
As far as marketing, promotion, and all that. And so many of them don't realize how important that is, and how you need to have money for both. It's like you need money for recording, but you also need to spend money on publicist or promotion or whatever route you're taking.
Right.
So that's what that comment was.
I think no, I agree. I think one of the things I've seen, I don't know about you, is I'll work on an album, either from production, engineering, mixing, sometimes the whole thing, and we'll get a discussion about what the price is, and then I'll watch an artist go and spend $30,000 on a video, and I'm just like, get one of your friends, do a low budget, cool indie video. Don't spend twice what you've just done on the recording.
Right.
It's people put money in strange places. We all know with YouTube, most of the most successful YouTube videos, with a couple of exceptions, but most of them are low budget, done by people on their own.
Yeah.
People aren't necessarily looking for massive production quality when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I would say the majority of my artists think backwards with that.
And so many indie artists think if the song is good enough and the production is good enough and the
That's all they
mixing is
need to
good
do.
enough and they get it on the internet, it's just going to grow legs and explode.
Yep.
And that never happens. People always reference like, what about these YouTube singers that explode? The reason they exploded is because they sang a cover and everyone searched that cover and found it.
Yeah.
Your original's not going to do the same thing.
YouTube, though, has sort of, whatever that algorithm is now, YouTube has made it so the cover songs aren't doing as well.
Wow.
YouTube's algorithm changes like daily.
Yeah.
And one of the problems, it's like Spotify we were talking about with David and stuff. The problem with problems, or the reality, problem's a big word, with Spotify and YouTube is if something is successful, they keep it successful. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very difficult. If you get a viral video on YouTube, it's very likely your next video will be viral as well because they're going to feature you.
Sure.
So it becomes self-sustaining. One of the biggest problems for us with Spotify is if you've got the top 5, it's almost impossible to get another song into the top 5 because if you're a new artist, I want to go and check out this guy Bob Horn. He's got his top 5 songs from 10 years ago. How does your new release make it into the top 5 when they go to discover you, they listen to those top 5 first? Mm-hmm. Like the number 1 song will almost always be your number 1 song. So it's very, very difficult for young artists or new artists or artists that aren't consistently releasing to keep that motion going. So I think the answer really is for all of us, producer, engineer, artist, everybody working in this, is you have to work.
Yeah.
As the old saying goes, writers write. Well, musicians write songs. They
Yeah,
record songs.
if you're a singer-songwriter, an artist, a rapper, you record a song in the studio, there should be no days off after that. You have something to do with that song every day. You need to be pushing that song. If you can, spend money on that song. Get that song to bloggers. Get that song to DJs if possible. You need to be doing everything you can after you've recorded it to get that song to listeners, because just putting it on a SoundCloud is not going to do anything.
Right.
That's the dream. Who are you talking to? And they were saying, oh, it was Junkie XL. He was like, it used to be that artists were these musicians that kind of like, oh, I make the music, and then they hang back. And he's like, now everybody's little mini CEOs who know their demographic, who know how to release, who know the business.
Well, what's
weird.
funny is when it doesn't work out with one song, they go and record and write the next song.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want to discourage anyone from recording or mixing, but if only 100 people have heard that song, you're not done with that song.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Keep pushing it. You know, Akon. I recorded Akon, and his album didn't hit for a year. They kept pushing it for a year. It just wasn't the right time. Mm-hmm. And then the next summer, it hit and exploded. And he stuck behind that recording for a year.
Wow.
And I see so many people, they release their song, and then a month later, like, oh, that didn't work. Let me record a new song. Mm-hmm. Or they get tired of the song. It's like, you got to get behind it, and you got to push it. And
so much noise now.
Unless people have told you that it's bad, that's the only reason to write a new song and move on.
Yeah.
Of course, releasing stuff continually is great, but if only 50 people have heard it, it's kind of a waste,
Right. I'm going to make sure that this webinar is available in the Academy with the link to buy the bundle. Asking Matt to do that now. Matt, if you're listening, that would be really good. So those of you who miss it, that also are Academy members, that will be there. We'll do more of these. These are fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for all of your time.
Of course.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. If you haven't already, here's the bundle. There it is. Go spend your hard-earned cash on it. But it's pretty phenomenal because the bundle, I'm going to look at it quickly. The bundle includes, where is my link to the bundle?
You don't get one.
I don't get one. You're not allowed one. Okay. First of all, the bundle's normally $500 and it's 485 is 197.
Oh.
It is producing and mixing Echo Bar Studios. That was 3 days work condensed to a 10-hour thing. Basically, it's going to be recording drums, the psychology of working with an artist, everything, guitar, bass, and drums, you name it, and keys, and the mix, and also Eric Riker's mix as well as your mix.
Even tuning and choosing vocal mics, like there's so much information in that one.
That's a huge one. Then we have the mixing pop rock. What was the artist? That was and that was you mixing a song that I also mixed, Shoot You Down, and that's Bob and I both mix the song. I mix it hybrid in the console, Bob mixes it in the box, so you get to see two completely different approaches. Then there's a mixing hip hop one, which is super inexpensive just on its own, and that's a hip hop course. Then there is mixing pop, which is a 4-hour course.
Yeah, that's a great song too. Great multi-track to practice on.
Yep. And then last but no means least is the new one, which is also only $47. These basically we're going to put up the prices of all of these. They're all too cheap. They are. So get it while it's hot. There's the bundle. Get them while they're hot. Thank you ever so much for your time. Once more,
Absolutely.
You rock.
Thanks to everybody that
Thanks everybody that tuned in.
tuned in.
Any last words of wisdom?
I think we've expelled it all.
He's all talked out. Me, on the other hand, I'm still going. All right, let's shut this schnizzle down.